In a video in the preparation, you saw how to implement a class using a portion of a point class as an example. You'll implement a full-fledged point class in today's PyCharm exercise, but before we begin that together, let's first review the video you saw in the preparation. Start with some code that uses notation you've used since the beginning of the class. Here we're defining a function called testPoint. It constructs a point with x-coordinate 30 and y-coordinate 22, and calls that point p. It then takes p and moves it by 5 units in the x direction and minus 10 units in the y direction to make the new x and y be 35 and 12 respectively. The video showed you that is new, and what you'll practice in today's PyCharm is that you'll see the inside of the definition of the point class, in which p.x will get a value, p.y will get a value, and there'll be the move_to method defined that moves the point, that changes its x and y. So that the way you define a class is that you put the word class, not def, but class, and then the name of the class, point here, and then the word object in parentheses with a colon after it. The word object just means that the class extends or is built upon the most basic thing, the object class. Saw that when an object is constructed, the special method __init___ runs. That init method will have parameters, here x and y, corresponding to the actual arguments in the constructed object, here 30 and 22. The expression point_3022 runs. The x parameter in the init method is set to 30, and the y parameter is set to 22. This brings us to the key concept in the definition of a class, namely what the word self, S-E-L-F, means in the definition of a class. When an object is constructed, as in the line above that constructs a point at 30, 22, as we've said, the init method runs, x and y are set to the 30 and 22 respectively, and self is set to the object being constructed, that is, the object which will be called p in just a moment. This is a key concept to repeat. When an object is constructed, the init method runs, and its first argument, which is always called self, is set to the object being constructed. So when the line self.x = x runs, remember x has been set to 30 in our example, and self is the object being constructed, the one that's about to be called p. So self.x = x has the effect of making p.x set to 30. This is an absolutely key idea, so pause the video and rewind or do whatever you need to do at this point to make sure that this idea about self being the object being constructed when init runs is clear to you. Okay, we've got one more line of code to go through before we start our live coding, and that's the line p.moveBy 5, -10. That causes a method moveBy defined in the point class to run. Here's the code. As you'd expect, when the line p.moveBy 5, -10 runs, the parameter dx in moveBy is set to 5, and the parameter dy is set to -10. Now here's the key question. What is the parameter self in moveBy set to? Pause the video at this point and see if you can figure that out. Give it 30 seconds or so to figure out what is self set to when p.moveBy 5, -10 runs. Again, pause the video and see if you can figure that one out. Now remember, we already saw that when an object is being constructed, the init method runs, and its first parameter, self, is set to the object being constructed. But when a method other than init runs, the first parameter of the method, again traditionally called self, is set to the object in front of the dot in the method call. So here, when the statement p.moveBy 5, -10 runs, that calls moveBy to run, and self in moveBy is set to p up there in the caller. Remember, p was previously set to have its x and y be 30 and 22 respectively. So self, which is now the same object as p, when the line self.x gets self.x plus dx runs, that means p.x = p.x 30 plus dx 5. so p dot x becomes 35. Similarly, p dot y becomes 22 plus minus 10, which is 12. I hope that you have a good sense now of what self is. Keep in mind what it says there in the blue box, and that will do you well. In any case, you'll deepen your understanding of what self is by the exercises that you're about to do in PyCharm.